Philip, you've not only stolen my thunder,
You told me to, Alex.
but you've revealed just about every interesting and funny thing in the book. And this will have the effect of no sales here today. I've written some stuff here, but I can't use much of it because you've already used it. But I'll pick a few bits out of it that you might find amusing. When I cautiously approached Steve, the manager of this splendid store, a couple of months ago as to whether he'd take this book, sell it, he looked at the book and glanced at the blurb on the back and said he'd take it. And I said, you can't tell a book by its cover. Steve said, yes, you can. Now, Steve really wasn't saying that you buy the books sell that have no substance. What he was saying, that a very good cover will sell a book. Well, it has got a great cover, but I take no credit for that. Steve Rankin, who's here today, designed the book. And thanks, Andrew, it really is a great cover. And the whole design of the thing is splendid, I think. And if it does sell, I think it'll have as much to do with that as anything else. Philip, thank you for your kind remarks. As I say, you've stolen my thunder. As you say, it's... well, I'm glad you said that you found it funny. Lots of very funny things happened to us in Saudi Arabia, and I'm glad that I was able, somehow or other, to get some of those more amusing incidents in the book. But it was also a rather challenging place, frightening in many ways. It's a very restrictive regime that most of you know about, so I won't seek to describe those. The book isn't a large one, it's only 30,000 words, but it does cover a fair amount. It covers a bit of history, a bit of geography, and you'll see, those of you who read the book, that of the 8 countries that I was accredited to, the 2 I liked most were the Yemen and Oman. The rest I thought were of no particular interest to a person like me, but the Yemen and Oman were extraordinarily physically interesting and with hugely interesting history. You'll see if you read the book that I really didn't like the appearance of Saudi Arabia very much. Its cities are not beautiful. Its countryside, the desert, is not very beautiful, but it can be profoundly beautiful at sunset and sunrise. Mecca and Medina, I'm sure, are very interesting places, but you can't visit Mecca and Medina. They're closed to infidels. There's a place called Madain Salah that Ian Biggs has seen in the desert. It's a Nabatean funerary complex. It's an extraordinary sight that we weren't able to see, unfortunately. It simply wasn't accessible to anybody, even diplomats at that time. I tried with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on several occasions to get them to take a group of ambassadors to Madain Salah. They didn't. It was just all too difficult, and they kept saying yes, but it was too difficult, and finally they took us to visit a petrochemical plant on the Red Sea. Philip has told you about some of the problems that we faced in dealing with the Saudi government authorities. The sheep problem was an appalling experience. But not all of our dealings with the Saudi authorities were unpleasant. Some of them were actually very funny. Paul Barrett, who some of you will remember, rang me the other day to remind, he's read the book, I'd sent him a copy, and he rang me to remind me of a very funny story that I'd forgotten. Back in December 1988, we got a message from Canberra, the embassy, asking us to arrange appointments with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for Paul Barrett and Nick Warner. Paul, some of you remember, was Deputy Secretary in the Department at that time, and Nick Warner was head of the director of the Middle East desk. Both of them were subsequently secretaries of the Department of Defence. Anyway, they were to come, and their purpose was to play John the Baptist for Bob Hawke, who planned to visit a visit to Riyadh in the following year, early in the following year. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs agreed to a visit by officials. All of this is done in writing. You have to exchange notes verbal, as they call them, diplomatic jargon, and the notes were exchanged. They agreed to receive these officials. They had productive talks about the visit and went home very happily. Later on, the Prime Minister decided that he wouldn't visit Riyadh. He was going to India, and he decided to go on to Pakistan and not to Riyadh. We conveyed this unhappy news to the Foreign Ministry, and that we thought was the end of the matter. But a few weeks, maybe months later, we got a note verbal from the Foreign Ministry saying that as Mr. Hawke was no longer visiting the Kingdom, there would be no point in a visit by Mr. Barrett or Mr. Warner. They'd sort of skipped back and were replying to the original note verbal that we'd sent to them about the visit of Mr. Barrett and Mr. Warner. Philip spoke of sheep, yes. I'll say no more about that. There is a lot about the war, not surprisingly, because it was the sort of the biggest thing that happened to us while we were there. Deirdre wasn't there for the actual the missile strikes. She'd been evacuated, but there's quite a lot in the book about what was happening in the embassy in that period, how we were managing the local, the Australian expatriates living in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states who felt threatened, and about the Scud missile attacks that were alarming, to say the least.